Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. A special thank you to Lashmi for joining us today as well. It's nice to see you. I'll start with a little bit of background information. So, we both met each other just a few weeks ago. We connected through a biotech event that York Angels held, and Lashmi was gracious enough to present her startup there. After hearing about all the wonderful, important work she's doing, I invited her to further that conversation in this format over Zoom. So, Lachmi, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Emma, for the introduction, for the invitation. I am really so pleased to be here and share more about what Maman is doing with
Of course.
everyone.
Of course, yes. Let's get started. So, why don't you start with maybe giving a brief introduction about yourself? And I know you prepared some slides to present, for the people watching today. So, why don't we get into a little brief introduction and then I'll let you start to share a little bit more about your startup.
Sure, I'm a material scientist, 13 years in this space, and our Maman, we started in 2024, January, so we just turned one. And our journey started based on my husband and mine, our own personal lived experience. We went through IVF ourselves, and I realized just how much it sucked. And you'll see more when I do the presentation about what that journey has been like. But I recognized that a lot of burden within the fertility treatment process itself, and we're solving at least one of them that I definitely think is an unnecessary burden. And I'm bringing all of my material science expertise to solve that.
Wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, I couldn't agree more, especially as a woman who's afraid of needles. This was something that I was so interested to hear about. So, yeah, I love that you're doing this and I can't wait to hear more.
So hi everyone, I'm Dr. Latchmi Raghunanan, CEO and founder of Maman Biomedical, and I'm one in six women around the world who experience infertility. And this is what a typical standard of care for infertility looks like. This is my own treatment cycle in 2023. It's invasive and burdensome, and as I said, very unnecessary. A typical cycle required 20 injections in 13 days. I say that's 20 injections too many. That's just one cycle. It takes a couple, usually 3 cycles, before you see some form of success. And each cycle costs $10,000 out of pocket. So it's expensive. And failure, you see these 20 injections, messing up any one of those single injections means that you can ruin that cycle. So it's not just painful injections that we're talking about. We're talking about 220 opportunities in any single cycle to make a mistake that's going to result in lost time or lost money. So imagine adding that to the burden already of having to going through this fertility treatment to try to have a kid. I recognize this unmet burden within the fertility space, and then our research showed us that the opportunity is even bigger than fertility. Over 1 billion people around the world take self-administered injections just like these on a daily basis, right? So we're starting within the fertility space, but we have recognized the opportunity to solve a problem for so much more. And so this is what our solution looks like. We're replacing the need for these daily injections. So think of something like a hormone contraceptive or a nicotine patch. It's actually our microneedle patch, right? Our technology, we just filed our patent, so we're patent pending, comprises of microneedles. These are sharp enough that they will penetrate the upper layers of the skin, but small enough that they never reach the nerve endings, so that it's painful delivery. Sorry, painless. Big difference here, painless. So these microneedles, they'll penetrate the skin and dissolve to release these active ingredients, the active drugs that we're going to carry. And that means we're delivering, unlike needles, which deliver um, pain every time you stick yourself, our microneedles are pain free. There's also the opportunity to integrate into here hormone sensing technologies, which leverages AI technology also, so that we can provide real time information on this hormone delivery back to the doctor, negating the need to have to go back to the clinic to get daily blood draws as well. Here's a little more on how it works. So, conventionally, these needles need to be, your fertility drugs are injected every 8 to 24 hours because they're not stable in the body for long periods of time. But with Mammon's product, we encapsulate these technology so that once the patch delivers them and releases these drugs in these capsules, they will slowly deliver over time, right? So maintaining the desired threshold levels. This has another added benefit. Current fertility treatment requires excess dosage of the required hormones in order to maintain that desired threshold. With our slow release technology, we can eliminate the need for these overdosing. And imagine how much better we'd feel if we weren't flooding our body with all of these excessive hormones on a daily basis. Now, the fertility landscape is dominated by large players, but none of them address the literal pain points currently associated within the fertility space, right? None of them are solving the literal pain points of daily injections. And so, Mammon, we've identified a strong opportunity here. Our indirect competitors includes lots of medical devices within the space, developing, also working on needle-free technologies. But we've also identified that these are still, like us, pre-commercial. And so a lot of these technologies aren't commercially available yet, or they're not even commercially available in North America. So again, one of the biggest differentiators for us is that we're not just a medical device that delivers the drugs. We're actually changing the nature of the fertility treatment. Sorry. We're actually changing the nature of the fertility treatment so that we're eliminating the amounts of drugs that we deliver, the time periods between readministration, and making the process more convenient overall so that women undergoing fertility treatment can continue their lives as normal. You're not disrupted for an entire month while you're taking these injections, um, that disrupts your ability to fly or travel or work. Now, the market opportunity is huge. We spend over 25 billion around the world every year on fertility medications alone. We've identified in North America, we spend 4.5 billion per year. And based on our ongoing market research, which shows a 20% willingness by existing IVF users to pay for a needle-free alternative, we've identified a $1 billion market opportunity in North America alone per year. Now, our beachhead clinic is Canadian, and we're going to start with those fertility clinics whose biggest differentiators are the user experience. And that's where we expect to find our target customers, those women who are willing to pay extra for the needle-free experience because either they want no pain or they want the convenience that this experience brings. In addition to penetrating and capturing piece of the existing market, we've also identified that this patch opportunity provides an opportunity for 36% of the population who cannot access IVF in its current form because of severe needle phobias. So there's huge market expansion opportunity too. Now, we're a drug-led medical device, which means that our go-to-market is dependent upon regulatory approval. Specifically, we're, drug-led medical device. Um, Once we have this regulatory approval, we're going to put Mammon Patch into the hands of paying customers, again through our beachhead fertility clinics. And once we've established that initial traction and uptake, we're going to engage sales and distribution partners to take this globally, starting with the North American market. Along the way, there's also opportunities to start generating revenue. And we've identified that we can uh, patent out, license out our existing drug delivery patent through different platforms for various other indications of use outside of our own scope. Now, our business model is simple. We're a B2B2C. Currently, doctors, a patient goes to the fertility clinic, sees a doctor writes a prescription. They take that prescription to the pharmacy and fills it out of pocket. We're going to follow the same model. We're going to supply our patches directly to the pharmacies, again, starting through the fertility clinic pharmacies. And so a user takes that prescription to the pharmacy and fills it. We're going to market to both the end user who pays out of pocket for this as well as the doctors who write the prescription so that the user, the patient, could go into the clinic and ask the doctor, can you tell me more about the needle-free option? Or the doctor can say, have you heard about the needle-free alternative? Now, Maman is a young company. I mentioned that we just turned one in January, but already we've accomplished huge, huge milestones. We just filed our first IP, patent and trademark. We've secured some institutional funding already, and we're already engaged in key strategic discussions with big manufacturers and pharmaceutical players in the space. Plus, we've got letters of intent from fertility clinics already. Now, we're a strong team poised for execution, led by myself, a PhD in material science, with over 13 years of experience developing similar technologies. I have previous experience in a medical device startup space, 4 years, and I've generated over my career 5 granted patents to date. I'm building this company with my husband, who's my co founder, and he brings over 20 years of governance and C suite leadership to the team. So we've got science, business, and governance taken care of. We're also surrounded by a strong team of advisors who help us to execute and strategically plan. Now, and to that note, we've identified our strategic pathway to get to commercialization. Our IP strategy is already laid out, as well as our fundraising strategy. And we've identified opportunities to start de-risking these preclinical and clinical studies as early as this year. Currently, we're fundraising 3 million for a 24-month runway. This is occurring in tranches. We're starting with a 500,000 tranche one, which will we hope to close over the summer. This money would be used to accelerate key de-risking milestones, such as clinical studies, getting into those early stage preclinical and clinical studies, and IP's already been filed, so we're well on our way. Maman Biomedical is transforming the fertility treatment experience for women like myself from 20 injections in 13 days to this. No more needles. And that's only the start. Thanks, Emma.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Lakshmi. That was amazing. I can never express enough how important the work is that you're doing. And I think I've told you before, I love hearing about it. So thank you so much. I'd love to get into a few questions if you don't mind. So, one thing that I found really inspiring was that your journey with this kind of started with your own personal journey with IVF. So, I'm curious to know how that transpired into what it is today. What was that journey like building off your own personal experiences into what you've created today?
You would have seen in my presentation, I spoke to superpowers. In 2023, sort of all my life I've been a scientist. That was my identity. I hadn't really thought about superpowers before. I was just really good at my job. But then I turned 40 and sort of like the world came crashing down. I hadn't started my family yet, and big crisis. What has it all been for? And so I left my job as a scientist and went straight to fertility treatment, my husband and I. And there I realized, how long and burdensome the journey was. We did 2 cycles, and through it all out, I kept, complaining how that every time I had to take this injection, I knew that I didn't need to because I recognized that we could use slow release drug delivery technologies in there, and I was familiar with those because those are things I worked with in my own career over my own career. And so I like to say after much complaining and talking, and that's saying it nicely, right? I use the B word. Um, so after much complaining about it, finally I convinced my husband. This is a culmination of my 13 years of trading.
Mhm.
I have the background and the expertise to solve this problem. I know what it is. It's an obvious solution for me. I'm a problem solver. That's part of my superpowers. And by this time too, I'd also really, gotten, like I said, my world had come crashing down. I went through this sort of self-reflection and really internalized what makes me really good at what I do. And this is why I identify I'm really, really good at seeing the future and planning for that future and then delivering on it. And so I combined all of this with a renewed sense of purpose and drive and passion and said, we're going to solve this. One, because it's an unnecessary burden. A solution exists. It's not, you know, a far-fetched solution. Technologies exist that we can bring to market. And so I can solve this too. It's so much validation because I have the the background. All of my, like I said, my 13 years has had led me to this point. Let's do it.
That's wonderful. You mentioned that there was already that technology present. You've worked with it before, you were aware of it, all that stuff. So I would like if you could break that down a little bit for me because I'm not in the industry. I'm assuming some of our listeners aren't in the industry. So was there a single big technological breakthrough that makes this possible? Or if you could talk a little bit more about maybe the technology that you knew of beforehand and the advancements that you knew beforehand. I think that would be really interesting for those of us who aren't as well versed as you are.
Yeah, so we'll start with a slow release gel. So that's where the idea really started. I hadn't immediately thought of patches. My idea was we can eliminate these injections. Instead of 20 injections, we can do only one injection because I have worked on making these gels, hydrogel materials that can slowly release over time, slowly degrade and release the drug products. And I know, you know, they're being investigated and used and applied. They're also commercially available for many other indications. My father-in-law takes these on a quarterly basis in his kneecaps. My uh, I have the research shows women take these hydrogels for treatments in there's all sorts of uses that these slow release injections are commercially used, and so that's where the idea really started. And once I started putting together what this business would look like, I also recognized, it sort of evolved from the slow release gel to something more impactful, which was the microneedles. And again, microneedle is something that I knew about because as my scientist, we read about it. But it's also cosmetically available. You can get microneedles, these microneedle patches that you can stick under your eyes for treatment. And I thought, so they're cosmetically available, but there's no microneedle for drug delivery that's commercially available yet. And that's because the difference to go from a cosmetic application to a drug delivery application, it's huge, a huge step
Yeah.
in the shape and the format and the way it works. And as yet, or to the past, the materials science hadn't caught up there yet. And then I recognized, but hey, I know how to manipulate materials. I understand really well the chemistry and physics of materials. I can make a dent here. And so, for a few months after we started, while I was developing the gels, I was actually working at home, kitchen countertop behind me, and developing these micro needle patches, taking the same formulations that I would make the gel with and tune them, and basically exploring. And I realized we could make microneedle patches with these too.
Wow. That's
So,
incredible. That's an incredible story. So I'm curious, it kind of goes without saying that needles have been the industry standard for so long. What is the initial feedback with these new advancements and ideas?
it's so obvious, and I think when I pitch this or I speak to people and they're like, yeah, that seems so obvious now. Why hasn't it been done before? Why has no one done this before? And I think that's because number one, we're so caught up with the status quo. It's an area, at least in the fertility space, where that's not the biggest problem. You think this is what you need to do because your end goal is to have a baby, and there are so many women who thinks that's good enough. But for me, I that wasn't good enough for me because I knew better existed. And so I'm like, there's so many other burdens surrounding trying to have a baby. Let's take away this, we don't need to have to make the cycle as burdensome as it is. We could improve it. And in analogous areas in diabetes, for example, right? That's an easy recognizable area. There's so many advancements that's been made in that field. Those diabetics don't have to stick themselves every day anymore. They've got all these nice, sexy technologies that's been
Yes.
developed, and none of that. When I looked, I searched, none of it's been applied within the IVF space, right?
Hmm.
And that's where I started to think, well, I know the technologies exist. Let's bring them to the space.
That's incredibly interesting because I 100% agree with you, right? Like the goal is usually to get pregnant, and a lot of times you're just going to suffer through, that journey because that's what you want at the end of the day. But I think it's really inspiring that you kind of took it a step further and saw how you could make the entire industry a little bit better. So I think that's really cool to hear. One of the things that can be the difference between a successful startup and an unsuccessful startup is launching things at the right time. So why is right now the right time for Maman Biomedical?
I think we were lucky and fortunate that we landed right in the middle of femtech boom. I hadn't meant it that way. It's just the way my own career, my own steps lined up. But yeah, when I started, um, I got and I intentionally built in public because this is something personal too, and I had a message to share. But building publicly also put me right in the center of femtech. Um, and building publicly, now you hear there's so much attention in the IVF space. So you're asking the why now. Women are becoming more aware of what goes into fertility. They're thinking about their fertility at younger ages. Whereas, and this is why I speak out to it, my own fertility journey, my infertility is age related. And throughout my career as a scientist, I always knew in the back of my mind, okay, I'm not family planning now, but IVF is always an option. And you hear the success stories. But then I went at 40 into the fertility clinic and realized at 40, my chances of success of less than 4%. And I should have been planning for this since my 20s, right? And so as women, we're told that we can have it all, but it's you don't go knocking on the door to have it all at 40. You have to plan for it at 20. And so that's why I speak about it, and it's working because everybody everybody's speaking about it too. So now is the time because there's attention in this space. There's a lot of investment in the femtech space, lots of interest. So it's not just fertility space, but overall femtech and female health. And it's driving. So the why now is everybody's interested. But I'll speak more to technology too. So that's around the market. But in terms of technology, microneedles been on, most people know microneedles for a long time now. They recognize transdermal patches, like earlier I spoke about the nicotine and the contraceptive patches. Those patches, the failure of those are they're based on absorption. Those molecules have to pass through the skin, whereas microneedles bypasses that by penetrating the skin to put the drugs directly into the body. There's been microneedle research for over 15 years now, but nothing's been able to come to market because of the material science. And so I'd say the advances in material science have been moving so quickly too that it's caught up that it's the scientific advancement as well as the market opportunity that answers that why now.
I couldn't agree with you more, especially just your point there about the more conversations about women's health. I feel like that there's been a pretty big shift in that in the past few years, which is really great to see. So it makes total sense why this would be the perfect time for you guys to, be launching everything that you are. One thing that you spoke about during your pitch was the highly regulated industry, which I can't even imagine all the kind of hoops you have to jump through when dealing with medtech and biotech. So I'm curious to know, how do you kind of navigate these regulations, especially when trying to, be at the top of innovation and, launch everything at a high speed? How are you navigating these industry regulations?
This is where I'd say my superpowers of strategy and execution come into play. And because I'm not learning these regulations for the first time, my previous experience in medical device startup, um, so I already know what's ahead of me. I have an idea. And then with that, so we've done our research and we've identified what our roadmap is. I have foresight enough to know and experience because I've done it in another company previously, that we don't wait until it's time to submit the regulatory approval to think about it. We need to start building into early stage at R&D stage what the regulatory processes, what checkboxes do we need to have to get regulatory clearance, what experiments need to be completed, what the design of the product needs to look like to and so that we're not doing things 3 4 times the same things over and over again. When we do it the first time, speed matters, but we're also making sure that we're intentional in when and how we check these boxes. And so, for example, I say we've identified opportunities for preclinical and clinical validation as early as now. Some of those opportunities, so we know one of our milestones for this year is to have our first conversation with FDA and Health Canada to really validate that, and we've got our plan, and we'll be able to, walk through this plan with them and have them approve it and say, yes, that's a plan that's going to get you, a successful clearance or whatnot, or have them advise us and what we need to think about differently. But that also means that there's experiments that we can start doing inside of those plans, that, I can pull out from a big FDA bucket and say, oh, this is a milestone in my roadmap
Mhm.
that it's going to check a box and show efficacy or validation or safety or something that de-risks our technology for us and for investors.
Yeah, I mean that makes total sense, and I think that's why your experience in this industry is such a powerful superpower that you have because you kind of know how to navigate all these challenges, and I think that's really great to hear that you guys have been able to navigate that kind of, seamlessly. Do you think there's any other challenges that founders in the biotech or med tech space have that maybe other industries aren't present besides like the regulatory issues and challenges there?
The regulatory is definitely the biggest hurdle because I've pitched to so many different investors, and that's one of the differentiators. Say versus when you're pitching something that can go to market so quickly, because the biggest question is how can they make their money back?
Mhm.
And when and so it's always we get stuck at that. Oh well, it's going to take us 5 years to clear regulatory, so
Mm,
you're looking at plus 5 years.
yeah.
Yeah, so that's why it gets hung up. Something that's new for us is the reimbursement part, and we've put that into sort of bucketed. Even though reimbursement comes after regulatory, we approach it the same way that we do regulatory. And so as we do product design and validation, we're building in what a reimbursement strategy looks like to know that, okay, if our product, and in our case, part of our product is going to be considered a diagnostic, then what diagnostic features do we need to be built in into now?
I imagine in this realm there's so many skeptics and people skeptical about new medical technology. What has your experience been like this up until now? How have you navigated it? I imagine that is also a little bit of a challenge.
Yes, on the one sense, it's scary when investors hear that it's going to be disruptive, that no one's done this in the fertility space before. And so then I have to tell the other narrative of, well, there's all this interest in microneedle, and all these other people interested in looking at it. And one of the biggest success stories, the vaccine patches are currently in clinical trials, right? And being deployed for phase clinical trials. Um, and then once they see it, that oh yeah, it becomes so obvious, it's the next step outside of needles. Then their question now goes to, well, why hasn't no one else done this yet? So it really it does go from, oh, it's scary, no one has done it yet, to, oh, there's all this interest in this space, or and now, oh yes, that's a really obvious solution. Why
Mhm.
hasn't, yeah.
I'm curious, how do you see the industry evolving in the next even 5 to 10 years, or maybe how do you hope to see it evolve? What are you hoping for in terms of the industry evolving in the next little bit?
In the next 5 years, because remember that's a regulatory roadmap. In
Yeah.
5 years, all of these things are going to be at market. We're going to be market ready. So you will have all of these. Everybody who is in femtech right now building, and the hormone is huge. Wearables, hormone sensing technologies. As for drug delivery, think of everything with this 5 to 10 year roadmap is going to be commercially available. Women are going to have so many more options than the current standard of care, the current status quo. So that's what I see, the big change being. For us specifically, in our industry, microneedles and drug delivery, I do think that's the future,
Mhm.
the next step outside of injections. So everybody knows injections now. As soon as microneedles have been demonstrated, commercially available, and those first FDA studies get cleared, yeah, then. microneedle is the future. Nobody's going to be talking about injections again.
I'm looking forward to that day. I'm excited for that day. What are you looking for in terms of raising capital? Where will you allocate those funds? What's kind of the whole journey around that?
Yeah, so we closed off our friends, family, and angel round this quarter, and we've been fortunate enough to snag an angel investor from the fertility space, and so they call these smart angels, where it's not only money that we're getting, which is a huge validation that he's from the fertility space too, but he brings a real skill set that's going to help us, advance our clinical research. And he's so keen and excited in this space. So the next step for us is this 3 million pre-seed raise, and we're going to do it in tranches because we know we've also got a lot of de-risking to do, and the Canadian fundraising ecosystem is a very different ecosystem. So we're anticipating, smaller tranches will get us there. What we're looking for, again, these early investors, probably a few 100,000 checks, are also going to be smart investors. So people who will help us. We've got a lot of learning too as we develop. Um, so we're not just looking for money. We're looking for people and investors who will help us get to the next milestone and the next milestone after that. So we're future thinking too.
Wonderful. That's great to hear. I'm eager to follow along with your journey, and I'm really excited for everything that you've discussed so far and what you guys have coming up. It's all really exciting and inspiring to hear. Just kind of wrapping up and along those lines, where can our audience and our network learn more about you, follow your journey, connect with you, anything like that?
Connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm very active on the LinkedIn community. So it's my name, Latchmi Raghunanan. Um, you can find us too on our website, mamanbiomedical.ca, and follow our journey. I do send out regular monthly newsletters. So if you're interested and excited in our journey, sign up to those newsletters where every month you can see, I share our successes, our big wins. I do share learning from our losses or whatever hasn't worked well or challenges. Yes, we do lessons learned too. And so you can, like I say, I'm building publicly. It's an embracive experience, not just about our fertility journey, but what it's like building a startup company.
I'll be sure to link your LinkedIn profiles, website, everything like that, wherever this is posted. So, anyone listening will be able to find you easy and hopefully be able to connect and all that stuff. But Lakshmi, thank you so much for joining us today. It was a pleasure to have you. Always a pleasure to hear about what you're doing and to discuss more. So thank you so much. I couldn't have asked for a better first guest on this new series we're launching. So
Oh, thank you so much, Emma.
I
It was my
appreciate your
pleasure too.
thank you so much. I appreciate you being here and always a pleasure to catch up with you.
All right.
Thank you so much.